Welcome, everybody, back to Ultimate Potential, a mental health podcast. I'm Tony.
And I'm Craig.
And we are here for your therapeutic benefit.
We hope so.
Yeah. So I'm sitting here with Nathan Sellers, LCSW.
Yes.
And Nathan is, today what we want to talk about is we want to talk about outpatient therapy. Craig and I, as you know, we work in inpatient program with youth. And Nathan was with us for a long time as a clinical director, as a therapist. He's done a little bit of everything, but he's one of these dual citizen therapists who's spent part of his career at an inpatient setting with youth. And now he is in a private practice out in the community and specializing with youth.
I work with youth. Mostly I'm specializing in depression, anxiety, trauma.
Okay.
So no matter what the age group is, you can do it.
Yep.
And I'll just say that, you know, there's all kinds of difficulties that sometimes parents have when they're trying to find a therapist. And therapists are just like plumbers and dentists and artists. There's amateurs, there's mediocre, there's good, and then there's true masters. And without exaggeration, Nathan is a master clinician. He's a master therapist. He's got so much experience, and he's just one of the top tier therapists. What he does works, and I can share that from firsthand experience for having worked beside him shoulder to shoulder for more than a decade.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to just add a little bit. One of the things that I appreciate about Nathan is just his demeanor and the fact that he is in the profession because he actually cares about human beings, right? And I personally believe that that's kind of a prerequisite in when you're looking what you're looking for in a therapist. Anyway, my personal opinion. But having a big heart and being a genuine and sincere person who understands empathy and all that kind of stuff, that isn't enough, right? So he's the total package. He has that because there's a lot of brilliant therapists that have the brainiac stuff going on, but they have kind of divorced themselves or never had the personalized, right? It's the heart, and he has both. And we really are grateful for all the years that he worked with us, obviously, where we learned to have confidence. But the biggest compliment I can give Nathan is that I would send my own children. I would go to him myself. I'm very confident in giving referrals to Nathan. And
thank you.
And so it's with a really warm welcome, and out of really honor and respect that you are the first outpatient therapist that we've invited onto our podcast.
It's exciting.
Yeah. And just another little tidbit about Nathan. My graduate professor said, therapy is half art and half science. And Nathan has the science down, but he's also an artist, like legitimately an artist.
Yes. Very talented
in
artist.
all kinds of mediums. But one of the cool things that Nathan would do when he worked here with us at Telos is he would create his own Halloween costumes every year. and we're not talking like go to the thrift store and find something.
These are like the type of Halloween costumes that you go to professional contests and you win awards for. Like, this is legit.
Nathan, what are some of the costumes you made over the years?
I did a 7-foot monster costume with extendable hands, movable fingers, and all that kind of stuff that I just invented all of it.
And you would sculpt the mask and the like.
Yeah, I did Hiccup from How to Train Your Dragon 2. Batman twice because I gotta keep doing that better. So
I remember Spider-Man in there too.
Yeah, Spider-Man was in there.
Okay. Well, Nathan, what else should our listeners know about you, about your practice, what you do?
Well, I think it's important to understand that a lot of who I am is about how can I help people heal, grow, and become the best version of themselves, right? That's really my platform. I'm, always looking for what harm needs to be healed, but more importantly, that we limit ourselves so much by failing to continue to set goals to strive for improvement. And sometimes our mental health issues because we've stopped striving and we feel the stagnation and we don't realize, oh, this depression or this discontent that I feel is because I'm not actually trying to step up in my life, trying to better myself in some way. And so a lot of that is, I'm doing that in my own life. I've worked on creating my own podcast. I've got a YouTube channel out there, all designed to help people heal and to learn, better ways to improve themselves. So I take clients primarily who deal with anxiety and depression, and trauma kind of things. But I work with couples, I work with, young kids, grown-ups, whatever, that I can help kind of move in that process of growth in their lives.
How do people find you? I know you have a podcast, you have a website, you're licensed to practice in some various
So I'm licensed
states.
in Utah and Michigan currently. I'm working on New Jersey and Texas. But my website is just nathansellers.org. And on there's a scheduling, link and all that kind of stuff, but also links to books that I've written, my YouTube channel, and, different kinds of things that way. But also my email address is a great way to contact me if you're wanting to connect. It's just Nathan Sellers, LCSW, at gmail.com.
Okay.
And those are all great ways to connect with me if you wanted to work with me.
I've seen your YouTube channel. There's actually some entertaining stuff on there.
There's-
So go check it out. So let's maybe kick it off. And, and you did touch on this a little bit. You said you help people heal, you help them grow, and you help them improve themselves. It's
Yeah.
kind of your mission
Yeah.
as a clinician. How does somebody know when it's time for legitimate therapy? When do you stop just reading the self-help books, or just talking with your friends, or just kind of white knuckling it, trying to grit your teeth and make change happen? When do you actually seek out a therapist?
So I've been thinking about this for a while now, and I think one of the important things that's happening in the world now is we're moving away from the taboo of therapy,
Yeah.
which is really helpful. But we still haven't got it right in our heads, where we still prioritize physical health over mental health, thinking that one is obviously more important, and they're not. They're actually quite similar. So if I ask the question, how do you know when it's time to go to the doctor?
Yeah.
We could answer that question fairly easily. Oh, well, like if I'm bleeding really bad and I can't stop it, or, if my finger's, in a weird direction, some of those things you can easily say. Or like, hey, I'm sick and I'm not getting better, and I took a Tylenol and man, that didn't work. And I took a Sudafed and that didn't work. And so I need help. And I'm worried maybe it's this. Well, all those reasons we would go to the doctor. Mental health is no different. If what we're feeling feels off, that's a good reason to go get therapy. If what we're currently doing isn't working or isn't good enough to help us to navigate life in a reasonable way where we're happy and doing okay, then get therapy. If something is broken in our lives, and that might be our relationships, our marriage, whatever it might be, go get therapy. It doesn't need to be like some gigantic reason, and that's allowing us to move beyond the taboo of therapy. And I'd even add on to that, right? Because sometimes people, we got used to that idea of, well, therapy, you're laying on a couch talking to some guy and you're in it for 7 years. Well, no, you could do it in 3 or 4 weeks if it's not that bad of an issue. It's just getting yourself back on track, having someone to bounce things off of. And then there's other times where it's like, well, you know what? I've got this kind of chronic issue that I know I just need consistent help with. And so I'm going to keep going to my doctor.
Just like diabetes.
Yeah.
Well, I remember one of my trainers, therapy mentors, said, therapy is for people who want to learn more about themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So nothing has to be broken.
Right.
Like you said, you help people improve, or you help them grow.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing has to be broken or hurting. per se, right? To go to a session and to get a third party perspective and some ideas about how you can continue to evolve.
Well, I have
as
I have a
person.
client right now that I've been working with actually for several years, off and on. And I was kind of sitting with him. Hey, I feel like we've met a lot of our goals. We've been doing really well. It seems like you're in a really great spot. Well, what do you want to do? He's like, oh, Nathan, you're never getting rid of me. I said, what? He's like, you are what helps me to continue going and being successful in my life. I keep leveling up, and you're leveling up with me.
You're part of the
Yeah.
self-care.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say that our culture is changing and worldviews are changing, that's true, I think, in geographical areas. If I remember old research, it's a decade or so ago, but, even the old sitcoms and the old, when you're in certain geographical areas, New York City or San Francisco, going back 30, 40 years, the professionals, like, it was the cool thing. Like, anybody who was successful in business or politics, it was expected that they would have a mental health professional helping them, right? And so for some cultures, actually for a lot longer than 20 or 30 years going back historically, it's been not just okay, but it's actually like culturally expected, if you're a successful person, that you would have someone helping you. But yet in Utah where we live, definitely not the case, right? I mean, there's a lot of countercultural stuff that for sure, big taboo about going to therapy, and it was shame-based, and you had to keep a secret. And I mean, even all the HIPAA laws and regulations, like, it's right. Why do we even have to protect? Like, why should we even be embarrassed? But there are, so this concept of a really good therapist can actually help you to grow, like like kind of your big push, the name of your podcast and your vision as a therapist. But there are times, right? I mean, we're in a suicide pandemic,
Yeah.
right? And there are thousands of kids just in this valley
Yeah.
who are suicidal, and deaths every day,
Yeah.
right? And there are other things, right? Whether it's self-harm or whether it's failure in school or just chronic depression or, marriage is falling apart, relationship issues. So talk to us about, like, do you have any advice for our listeners on a few things that you would say for sure you need therapy?
Yeah. I mean, with what you're saying with suicide, if you're having suicidal thoughts, go.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're going to act on them, but that's your body's warning sign. Like, something's not right.
Right.
And that might be just intrusive thoughts where it's like, I don't know where this thought is coming from, but I had it and I can't get it out of my head. Go.
Yeah.
Because there are people that can help you to manage those intrusive thoughts. If you're feeling like everyone is out to get you or nobody likes you and there's no reason for living, go. Get help, because there is a reason for living, and there is someone who can help you kind of move back into that place where you actually feel that way. Some of the things that we fail to remember with our own mental health is that emotions are temporary, because when we're in them, they feel permanent.
Yeah.
And when we stay stuck in that feeling, they tend to be more permanent. And so having someone there to kind of walk you through and to kind of be a sounding board for you and to talk through and help you to see maybe where you're thinking about things a little off is immensely helpful.
Yeah.
My brother once told me, he said, if you find yourself spending a lot of time talking yourself out of going to therapy, like all the reasons why you shouldn't go to therapy, that's probably a sign that you should go, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of reasons to go to therapy. Like, there's individual therapy, there's family therapy, there's, couples therapy, whatnot. And I would say if something is off in your life and is disrupting your life fairly significantly, go.
Yeah.
That could be in your marriage. That could be in a relationship with your child. It could be a relationship with yourself. It could be a work thing, whatever it might be. Get help. Like professional athletes aren't going to hesitate. Like if they're not cutting it,
You're right.
they're going to go get help.
Yeah.
Not just like, they might get mental health, help, but like if they're a trainer, right? They're going to do whatever it can to level up and be their best selves.
Nathan, what about when I bet there are people out there right now that are saying, I would love to go to therapy, but I know that I've got a really complicated issue going on in my marriage. We need couples therapy or we need family therapy, but their partner is unwilling to go.
Right.
What should those people do?
I mean, there's a lot of ranges of how that happens. I'm a big believer in family systems theory, and what that in essence is that a system is made up of parts, but it's bigger than the parts.
Yeah.
And any change in one part of the system affects the entire system. And the cool thing about that, sometimes we look like, well, that sucks. Like someone does this and it affects me. Well, yeah, it does. But the cool thing about it is if I can make a change in myself, it also affects the rest of the system.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if you're in a spouse relationship and your partner isn't wanting to go get therapy, you can still do work on you. You can still learn skills and strategies to work with your partner and to talk with your partner in healthier ways and all that kind of stuff that can have an impact on that relationship itself.
So, for example, somebody that's in an abusive relationship, even though their abuser probably isn't going to want to come work on the relationship, that person learning how to set better, healthier personal boundaries could allow that person to cope with what they're feeling and eventually find the strength to get out of the relationship.
Yeah, or get out. Or sometimes, abusive relationships happen simply because someone doesn't know how to hold boundaries. And so they perpetuated this process for their whole life, not realizing that they could actually say no, or no, you can't talk to me that way, or whatever. And when they do, it's a shock to the system.
Right.
The system's going to want to stay the same. And for someone to understand, okay, the first time I try something new in this relationship doesn't mean it's going to change, because the system is going to do everything it can to stay the same.
Yep.
And so you have to keep working to perpetuate the new change until that becomes the new way of being, and then it adjusts.
So I have a question. Somebody goes and finds a therapist, and for people who don't know, you get on the website, they see all these faces, they see the letters behind the names, they don't know what that means. And then you go and you actually have your first session. I think that the fit, it's important, right? Mm-hmm. What should people be looking for in a therapist so they know that they have the right fit, so they know it's going to be helpful to them?
Absolutely. And this is important to understand that not every therapist will be good for every person. Mm-hmm. Right? I believe I'm a pretty good therapist, but I'm not going to be a pretty good therapist for everybody. There's going to be people that they probably won't mesh with me because of my style or whatever, and that's okay. And so first step is just checking in with yourself and saying, what kind of people in my life have the most positive impact on me? Who am I most likely to listen to? And what is it that they say and do that makes me want to listen to them? And evaluating that. And then it's saying, okay, I'm going to write those things down. Those are some of the characteristics I need in a therapist. Obviously, you want a therapist who actually knows what they're doing. And unfortunately, that doesn't mean that they have letters behind their name. Right? There's a lot of therapists out there who learned skills but don't really know how to practice them and just are all about just talking. And therapy is more than just talking or just letting someone talk to you and listening and saying, man, that sounds hard. There is skill involved, and having kind of guidance and recommendations and assignments is actually kind of an important part of the therapy process. If your therapist isn't going to give you stuff to do outside of session, why do you think things are going to change?
Right.
I used to have a sign in my office back when I worked with you guys that said, the real work happens outside of this office.
Yep.
As a reminder, not only to myself, but to them that, okay, we just did a lot of talking, but it means nothing unless you take it outside of this office and do something with it. So having specific assignments and skills and all that kind of stuff for them to work on is going to be important. So when you're looking for a therapist, find out, do they assign things? Do they provide skills? What are their specialties and areas of focus, right? I don't do a lot of work with people that have pornography issues. Do I have some skill in being able to help people with that? Yeah. But is it my specialty? No. Are there others who do? Yeah. And they're going to probably do a whole lot better of a job than I would in that area. And so it's an important thing. Okay, what is my issue? What am I needing help with? And then figuring out people who specialize in that one. And then a lot of therapists will do this. They'll do kind of a consult, like a 15-minute consult, free of charge, where you guys can figure out, will you work with each other?
Yep.
Get a sense of personality, right?
Yeah.
Whenever I do that with someone, I'm going to tell them the kind of person I am, the kind of ways I work, and I'm going to be real with them. I'm not going to try to put on any show. If they don't like me, that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't want to work with them if they don't want to work with me. It wouldn't work.
I think that's really important, just to know that therapists are willing to have a little mini job interview. Most of them, right? It's like, hey, let's just do a quick little consult. Let me get a sense for your personality. My son went to a therapist, and we walked in the room, and immediately we both knew this isn't going to work.
Yeah.
Just immediately. The way that you connect with someone or you don't, right?
Yeah, that stiff and stale, that awkward. Meeting with a therapist really the first time is always a little bit awkward because you're like, I'm about to tell you all my stuff and I don't know you, right? But there's people that can make that real awkward, right? And some of it's, that just lack of emotional connection and presence.
But like what you were saying before, even if they're talented and good at that, it might be it could be something from some prior relationship where you're automatically triggered, right?
Yeah.
Because you're projecting. If I'm coming in and I have a father that sexually abused me, right? And I've been dealing with this for 20 years, and I show up in your office and you look just like my father, right? That might not be a good thing. Or it might be a great thing, but you've got to at least consider that when you're choosing. Yeah.
I would say another thing that comes to mind is bias. Therapists are human beings too, right? And we have our own beliefs. We have sometimes our unconscious bias, and so I think it's probably important to choose a therapist that is okay working with you.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you're LGBTQ, that it's probably not the best thing to go find a therapist who doesn't share, those social views.
Yeah.
So Nathan, when you have over a decade in inpatient residential care, and you've also been doing outpatient practice through that whole time.
Yeah.
But now you're exclusively outpatient, and you are brilliant when it comes to study and keeping up on theories and very educational. And you've been like speaking at all these conferences and presenting because you're also a leader in the industry, right? How do you know? And we're speaking now to families, right? Like part of our podcast, part of why we do this is to give real people real resources.
Yeah.
As an outpatient therapist, what advice do you have to a family who's trying outpatient, right? But who probably needs inpatient, right? They probably need to go to that next level. As a therapist, I think that's pretty obvious to you because you've seen both worlds.
Sure.
What advice can you give a family who might be in outpatient therapy right now and maybe spinning their wheels or maybe living on a little dangerous life? When would you suggest to them to call an educational consultant or call a program or to call the insurance company or to try to start to look for something maybe at the next level for their children. So this is obviously talking about youth, young adults, teenagers.
It's a great question. And somewhat challenging, obviously, because the emotional nature of moving from that realization and that acceptance of what I'm trying to provide for my child isn't working, and the path that I see this going down is one that is leading to severe consequences. I'm not talking about, the kinds of consequences where they might not get asked out to prom, or they might not have friends for a little bit.
They might get kicked off a team or something
Right.
like that, right?
What I'm talking about is, maybe drug use that's leading towards a really dangerous scenario where they're hanging around people that are dangerous, drug dealers or gang members. Like, these are scary kind of things, where they cannot keep themselves safe, right? Maybe that's through self-harm or suicidal threats and ideation, where their mental health issues are significantly impacting their academic performance to the point where they're refusing to attend school at all. And nothing that you do or anyone else does is actually making any significant impact on the trajectory of that. So it's these bigger consequences, right? Like social, physical, academic, all these areas where if it's a big consequence that's coming or has already arrived, outpatient therapy is not going to put much of a dent in that. Right. And here's why. Like, working now as an outpatient therapist and seeing the difference from when I was an inpatient therapist. As an inpatient therapist, I had an entire team. Yeah. Where I could do, a great session with a client, and now I can say to my team, all right, here's what we're working on. Here's what I need you to be watching out for with him or her, and in getting them to implement the things that we've talked about in therapy. So you have this team approach that's kind of a 24/7 approach to making change. Whereas as an outpatient therapist, I have no control.
Right.
None. Right. They leave my office, they're done.
Right.
I don't have much interaction with them from then until our next session. I don't usually have all that much information coming in about what's actually going on, right, unless, parents or spouse or themselves will, inform me. And I don't even always know how true it is.
Right. Because even a parent only has that small perspective. Right. They don't see them in school. They don't see them in activities or with their peers.
Right.
And you're not going to get any feedback from the peers. And you're right. So you're only getting a snapshot. Even if it is valid, it's only a small snapshot.
Right. So let's say I had a client come in and he's or she's in this, difficult place. I can see the depression spiraling, refusing to go to work, or whatever, and they're struggling, and I'm going to give them tools and skills to be able to shift their thinking, to practice, better mindfulness, better self-care, exercise, whatever it is, to kind of get them going into a place that jumpstarts their system towards pulling out of that dive. But if something happens like 10 seconds after session that kind of puts them in that funk again, they might not mentally revisit anything that I've said to them or counseled them on or wrote down for them or whatever in that week. But in an inpatient kind of setting, they might have that rough moment and they've got someone right there with them, reminding them and coaching them and kind of redirecting and following through with that treatment plan.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're saying if you're a parent and you have a child that you're concerned about and that child is in individual therapy, family therapy, outpatient therapy, that if motivation to change is low or insight is low or capability to keep yourself safe is low, that might be a time to start thinking about a change of environment, which would be inpatient.
And then I know I'm asking you the questions, but I'm just thinking of the obvious, like all 30 years of parent support groups that I've done, right? And there are certain themes that are really, really strong with families telling those stories about, oh, this is when we knew, right? This is when we knew. And many of them, it's like, it's when, right? Many people can be patient with almost a complete deterioration of their child's symptoms to the point of dysfunction, but they're still grasping. They don't want to pay for it, or they don't know how, or they don't have the resources, or they just can't deal with the narrative that as a parent that they failed, or whatever reason why they hesitate. Right. But then it comes to a point where now the child's behavior has completely dysfunctionalized the entire system. I can't go to work anymore. I can't stay married anymore. I can't sleep anymore. Right. Now my mental health is so when the child's behavior, literally, that going back to that family systems theory, has almost put the entire family system in a prison.
Right.
Like that's an obvious time too, right? So
I'm looking at our podcast tech. There's a little bit of noise outside the room, and he's worried about that. You know what? That we are filming this podcast, recording this podcast in a treatment program. There's nothing more beautiful than the sounds of people.
Of actually people working.
Yeah,
on
people
these
working
things.
on their issues. So don't worry about it, Jordan. So onto a slightly different topic, which I think is really related. Craig, you work out. Nathan, you work out. I obviously work out.
It's very clear. Yeah.
It's very clear. A lot of people that work out, they drink like a pre-workout supplement, right? Uh-huh. And that prepares them to go and make the best of their effort. What is the pre-therapy supplement? What would you love for people to know before they come in for therapy that you think would really set them up for success?
Yeah. I think the first thing is understanding that therapy is not a magic wand. There's work involved. And so like with a pre-workout kind of thing, you could take a pre-workout and go to the gym and sit on a bench and look at your phone, and you're not going to get any stronger.
Yeah.
So the idea is recognizing that therapy is work on a range of areas. And so I think the biggest thing is having the vulnerability to be completely open and honest with yourself. We lie to ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe even that's a harsh word, but we deceive ourselves.
It's true. Yeah, for sure.
It's that idea of, we look for reasons why it's not our fault. We look for ways to blame and hide and cover up all the things that we're insecure about, or the ugly parts of ourselves. And when we actually drop that, when we actually are willing to really look at ourselves and say, you know what, I am doing that, or hey, you know what, I do tell myself this. That's that first step. When I have a client who's just completely open to being honest with themselves, the work is way easier. And sometimes it's not even that they have to be terribly insightful either. Insight is helpful, but then that next step comes into, even if you're not insightful, being humble and teachable is the next step. If someone who is willing to learn and try new things, that beginner's mind idea, not think you have it all figured out or whatever, that teachable mindset will enable someone to really learn.
So if somebody comes in already ready to work, that's a big difference from somebody who comes in where you have to convince them that they need to work.
Obviously. Yeah. If you're having to convince them that they have to be there, you're starting a few steps back.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's okay. I mean, if that's the case, it just keep in mind it's going to take longer and therefore cost more. And if that's where you're at, okay, that's where you're at. It's better to be there in the first place than not.
Yeah.
I've been mindful, and in a few really direct ways recently, I've been reminded that there are cultural assumptions about therapy, right? So if you're a parent of a toddler, right, your job is to kind of protect them and keep them from pain. But in my volunteer work, right, I'm a wrestling coach, right? My job is not to keep my athletes from pain, right? It's just the opposite. There's a strong assumption that therapists exist to make you happy and to keep you from emotional pain. But if I come into therapy and I assume that you're going to make me feel better, can you just address that?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. I had a young adult, probably in his mid-20s, come for therapy because he realized his PTSD was impacting his relationships, pursuing a girlfriend and all that kind of stuff, and hadn't really done a lot of work around it to a great degree. And as we dove into the history and the experiences and the beliefs and all that kind of stuff, I probably didn't have a tissue box big enough. And that wasn't just for the sad feelings. There was a lot of angry feelings that came out, a lot of violent kind of feelings that came out. And I think he left that session feeling like, I feel terrible.
Yeah.
Fortunately, he came back, right?
Right.
And we were able to continue to do that work. But when you've kept things bottled up and you finally open up that bottle, you can't expect good feelings to come out.
Yeah.
Right? Festering doesn't equate to good feelings.
Yeah.
And so you have to be able to be willing to feel the yuck and the discomfort in order to get to the other side of it. And that's one of the things that I talk to a lot of my clients who struggle with anxiety. A typical pattern of dealing with anxiety is to avoid, right? To kind of find ways to numb or isolate. And I talk about this curve, this anxiety curve. And it's that idea of, okay, well, your avoidance strategy doesn't actually reduce your anxiety all that much. In fact, it may reduce it just a little bit so it's a flat line. But it really actually just is a gradual up.
Yes.
Right? And so I say, all right, now the real way to work through your anxiety is to step into it. Now, what you're going to experience when you do that is a dramatic increase of anxiety. It is going to be a spike.
Yep.
But on the other end of that spike is a dramatic decrease to the point where it's now gone, or at least reduced to a very manageable level. And so in order to be able to heal, we have to step in to the discomfort, feel the feelings, and to actually realize, oh, I can handle that.
Yeah, pain is involved, right? Anybody who's had an infection or has had to drain a wound knows that pain is involved in healing, discomfort. Well, coming back full circle, Nathan, you've watched throughout your career, you've watched youth try to grow and develop, young adults, couples, people of all ages from all backgrounds. If you had one piece of advice, or maybe more than one, that you could give to the world that you think would greatly increase the mental health issues that we're struggling with right now, what would you say? What advice would you give?
I'm going to use one word and then I'm going to break it down into its many parts. And it's a buzzword that we hear all the time now, and it's mindfulness. But hardly any of us understand what mindfulness actually means. And so my definition of mindfulness is to be present in the moment without judgment. And now we'll break those parts down even further. Being present requires us to slow down. We're going way too fast. We think about a bajillion things. We're trying to manage 100 things at once. we're doing too many things. We don't have the time. But we need to actually slow down. Because when we slow down, we can actually learn to quiet the chatter.
The mental chatter.
The mental chatter. Like there's always stuff going on. And sometimes people are afraid to slow down because then they really hear it. And it's now more present. But that's actually the key, is you have to be mindful of it and notice it, but being able to notice it for what it is. And that's that without judgment thing. I've been doing ice baths lately, and it's weird and crazy, yes. But there's an idea of when you get into an ice bath, I mean, it's like 32-degree water, right? Your body responds immediately, saying, nope, no, I'm out, no good. And it's going to take a deep breath in, and there's that panic, right? That's what life is doing to us. And we're living in that panic mode all the time. But what I've learned to do is, if I'm prepared going into that, I'm already controlling my breathing. I'm already controlling my thinking. I'm telling myself, yeah, it's going to be cold. Yeah, and it's going to be uncomfortable. And I know that there's another side of it. And I know that it's actually going to have a positive feeling on the other side. And I'm going to be okay. And so I've got my breathing under control. I've got my thinking under control. And I get in that water. And yep, there's still going to be that little bit of response of like, whoop, whoop. But I can now get into that place where I am breathing calmly 5 seconds in. And not shivering, not stressed out. My muscles are relaxed. And I'm in 32-degree water. And if we had that ability to approach our lives like that, to get our thinking under control, recognize, how am I thinking about these situations? Like if my child is driving me crazy, how am I thinking about that? I'm thinking about it as this terrible, awful thing instead of just a part of life. Okay. And if I'm controlling my breathing, I'm staying calm, I'm regulating my nervous system, then I'm more clear thinking as I get into that situation with my child or my spouse or, my coworkers. It's that idea of being present in the moment, accepting this is the moment. And then that place of non-judgment. We judge everything as good or bad or, whatever. We got to move away from judgment. And when we can do that, I think our brains work better. Our bodies work better. Our relationships work better because we're more at peace inside of discomfort.
And, avoiding judgment of self and others.
Mm-hmm.
That may be the best definition and breakdown of mindfulness I've heard. You've taught me something about mindfulness. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nathan, I want to personally thank you for spending the time coming into our studio here and sharing your wisdom with us. I also want to thank you for the good that you're doing in the world,
Thank you.
person by person.
And I want to thank you for being a catalyst of change for real people that I've known and that I still know, life-saving intervention for the people that I love and care about a lot. I know that you have heard that from me before, but I'm telling the world how grateful I am for you.
Thank you.
So to our listeners, just wrapping up, I hope you feel encouraged. I hope you feel hopeful, knowing that there are professionals and people like Nathan Sellers out there who are standing by, ready to help. We're there, right? We exist, and we're here to help.
Can you please repeat again the name of your podcast, your website, and your YouTube channel?
Yeah, so my podcast is The Healing Process, and that can be found on several platforms. And my YouTube channel is Nathan Sellers Heal, Grow, Become.
And that's SELLERS.
That's correct. Yeah. My website is nathansellers.org. And if you want to.
And then do you have another website where you sell your costumes?
No.
No, dang. All right.
I don't sell anything.
I was going to log on.
That's just for fun.
All right. Okay. All right.
All right, friends. Well, thank you so much. And we will catch you next time on Ultimate Potential, a mental health podcast. And remember, mental health matters.